Hello everybody, welcome to Auth Answered. My name is Will Johnson. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0, and this is a series where we answer your frequently asked authentication and authorization questions. Today's episode is going to be about the different type of attacks that can happen on your application. So let's get started. All right, first question. All right, what is a brute force attack? So a brute force attack is a trial and error type of attack where the attacker tries different combinations of a password until they get the right one. Kind of like if someone was picking a lock and they tried every single combination until they got one that particularly works. So there's no sophistication, there's no intelligence behind using a brute force attack. It's just trying until you get something that works. Just going from 4 characters to 5 characters in a password significantly increases the time that it takes to try and crack that password. So that's one of the ways that is tried to mitigate, is by having a longer password, because eventually if you have some type of protection on your website, it'll know that the brute force is trying and then will lock out that IP or whatever it may be coming from. If you don't want to go through the hassle of creating a super long password, then the best way to avoid getting hit with a brute force attack is to just go passwordless altogether. All right, so next question. What is XSS or cross-site scripting? XSS is an attack where the attacker puts malicious code onto a legitimate website that loads for the user. Two of the more popular ways is adding the malicious code to an end of a URL or in some unvalidated comments, like on a forum or a social media comment page or something like that. So for example, an attacker can post some code inside of JavaScript script tags that is actually executable inside of a comment. Then any user who clicks that comment will actually run the code and become a victim of that attack as well. Also, client-side JavaScript can give the attacker access to APIs that can give them geolocation data, webcam data, and other type of data that you wouldn't want out there into the world. One way to mitigate is you make sure that the information gets validated and has certain parameters that they need to do to order to submit that information. Or you can make sure that there isn't any allowance of HTML input as a way to not even allow the attackers to actually put that in. Or the cookies could be tied to a particular IP address, so the attacker wouldn't even have access to them. All right, so let's go to the next question. What is credential stuffing? So credential stuffing is when an attacker takes passwords that have been breached and stored in a breached password database somewhere and then try them over and over and over on a different website. Usually credential stuffing attacks are usually done by bots. And one of the ways that the bots gets around traditional security practices is that it uses different IPs or makes it look like the requests are coming from different IPs at a very short interval of time to try and get that password in. So it's different from like a brute force attack where it's trying like over and over and over. The bot will try multiple in a short period of time and it look like it'll come from different places. So that makes it a little bit harder for it to be detected by your standard mitigation strategies. With Auth0, we have bot detection, and they're able to detect the bots even if they're coming from different IP addresses and put in place some protection. So that's something you wouldn't have to worry about if that were to happen. And then another way to not worry about credential stuffing attacks being effective could be that you could just not use a password at all. All right, so next question. Next one is, what is CSRF or cross-site request forgery? So a CSRF attack is an attack that tricks user into making a change that they did not want to change. So for example, that could be changing their password or changing their email address. And then depending on what permissions the user has, changing that information could be, devastating depending on what access that user has. So one change of an email or a password could give an attacker access to lots of data. So it's very important to pay attention to these type of attacks. So the steps is that there will be a forced attack that that will ask the user to make a request. The attacker will then put in a link that goes somewhere malicious and trick the user into making a HTTP request. Then the user will click that link not knowing that it is malicious, and then that'll send the request. Then the server will receive that request that the user wanted to transfer money or change their password or change their email and actually complete that request. And usually the way to mitigate CSRF attacks is by using an anti-CSRF token, which will then create and then compare a randomly generated token string. And that's just like a quick overview of CSRF attacks. That isn't the full gamut. If you want to know more, there's definitely some docs you can check out, and we'll put the links in the description. All right, so next question. What is phishing? I'm pretty sure we all have been phished before, but a phishing attack, an attack where an attacker tries to look like a legitimate source to get some legitimate information from a user. So that can be an email with some type of urgency. You have 3 days to pay your taxes to the IRS. Click this link and give us your bank account information, or you have a package coming or something like that. It's usually something to strike some type of fear, so you kind of turn your thinking off and have an emotional reaction to be able to do that. You can also get phishing text messages as well. So again, if it seems too good to be true, doesn't make sense, has that that sense of urgency, you got to do it in 24 hours or something like that, might want to check the source, make sure that it is legit, so you won't be a victim of a phishing attack. Another type of phishing is called welling, which is when they go towards an executive or someone at a higher level at a company to try to get them to make some changes and get data that could potentially change other people in the organization, or send out a tweet or something as that person in the company and ask their employees to do something, since that's someone that they would trust. So phishing attacks are very effective because the way they tap into emotions and fear. Most email providers have phishing blocking, but some of them do get through. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And one thing I do like that if you're using something like logging in with your fingerprint or Face ID or something like that, that they are phishing resistant. So it's really another reason to get rid of using a password. All right, so let's go to the next question. What is a man-in-the-middle attack? A man-in-the-middle attack, or a person in the middle attack, is an attack where the attacker tries to intercheck the communication between two different parties. So it tries to get the sensitive information that's going from the user to the server or whatever it may be going. And actually, one of the ways that attackers initiate some man-in-the-middle attacks or person-in-the-middle attacks is that they actually use phishing as their entry point to hijack the communication from the user to the server. Some of the ways they intercept this traffic is by creating fake public Wi-Fi networks that people log into, and then they monitor the traffic there to see if there's any sensitive information being transmitted. Or sometimes the attacker may hijack or steal the user's cookie from their browser that was placed when they connected to the website. And then they'll use those cookies to impersonate that user and try to steal information. One thing about the cookies is that they expire, so the hackers themselves must act quickly if they try to get some information, so they won't have access to it indefinitely. And just a tip in general that I personally do is that I don't use public Wi-Fi at all. I make sure that it does have some type of password, and it's someplace that I trust, but I don't use the open free public Wi-Fi networks anywhere that I go. And I might be paranoid, but I don't know, it just feels safer to me. All right, so last question. What are injection attacks? Injection attacks are attacks where the attacker is able to enter some type of malicious code. The cross-site scripting attack that we talked about earlier is an example of an injection attack. And I'm sure as a developer, a lot of you have heard SQL injection. So SQL injection attacks where they're making malicious SQL statements and able to access the database and get information. You want to make sure that you have proper things in place to be able to mitigate those. Like some of the things you can do is like having a HTTP only cookie, not allowing like the HTML input so they can't inject JavaScript code or anything like that. But you can also use something like Auth0, one of our SDKs that has a lot of these mitigations in place. So that's something that you wouldn't have to worry about. All right, so that is all the questions we have for this episode of Auth Answered, which was focused on the different type of attacks. If you have any more questions of what would you like to cover it in Auth Answered or any other attacks you would like to learn about, please leave a comment below. So until next time, this is Will, and I will see you.